Good evening. Don't unfriend me, nation. Actually, good afternoon. This is going to be a longer episode. We're going over Donald Trump's town hall on CNN. Kind of a town hall, not really. It's Red Friday, folks. My name is Matthew Spear. I am the host of Don't Unfriend Me. Excited to have you here. And we're going to break it down. I'm going to give you the good, the bad, the ugly, and the nasty women, folks. Donald Trump talks about them all the time. Let's get started. Quick message about Red Friday, and here it is, and then we'll get right into the video. All 18 minutes and 34 seconds. Blaze Media, thanks for doing the cut. I will be doing the recap. Let's get it started.
It's Red Friday, RED Friday, which stands for Remember Everyone Deployed. A movement designed to honor veterans and deployed U.S. troops by wearing a red shirt every Friday. As simple as that may be, Red Friday is a great way to back those who serve our country. Go to dumbshow.com and search for Red Friday to get your red on.
Yes, America, Red Friday, all of that stuff. The town hall, the best moments, once again, thanks to Blaze Media. I want to break this down. This was set up as, obviously, to counteract Tucker Carlson getting booted from Fox. This has left a huge gap in market share for Fox. Fox has been plummeting stock and viewership. So, obviously, people are looking for a new news channel. Now, the obvious plight is to go for OAN or Newsmax or possibly this show or The Blaze or go over to Shapiro or whatever it would be before Tucker gets his new channel on Twitter, whenever that will be. It looks like that's where it's going to happen. But even if they can grab a % or two of market share points, this is a huge lift for CNN. So this is obviously a plight to grab Trump, people who are in the ether floating around in purgatory and trying to grab those people by having Donald Trump, because they're the new and balanced CNN. And this video is nothing and just shows nothing like that. We're going to go over it together. Let's get it started. I'll be doing commentary throughout and give you my thoughts. This is going to be a little bit of a longer show, but that's okay. I haven't done one of these in a while. I hope you enjoy. Here it is.
No questions are off the table, and we agreed to no conditions. We're here to get voters the answers that they deserve.
Immediately, liberal heads are melting. What do you mean no conditions? So they felt it was just going to be gloves off. She was going to come out swinging, hitting, punching, clawing, and kicking, and she obviously did. But what they didn't know is that the audience was all pro-Trump supporters. There were no, caveats to this, that Trump couldn't interrupt her, and it got a little contentious. Dare I say, a little more than contentious. Here it is.
Please welcome the frontrunner for the Republican nomination, former President Donald Trump.
If you look at what's gone to our country has gone to hell. Our borders are bad. Our military has been bad. You look at the taxes, you look at inflation, what's happened to inflation, it's just destroying our country. We've really become, in many ways, a third world country. And it's very sad what's happened in this administration. And it's something that will turn around on day one. We were energy independent. Now energy is at a level that we've never had to pay before. Nobody can afford to continue to pay what's happening with energy. But we were energy independent. We were getting out of Afghanistan with strength and with dignity. And instead we got out, we looked like fools, probably the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. One of the big problems was that Nancy Pelosi, Crazy Nancy as I affectionately call her, Crazy Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington were in charge, as you know, of security. And they did not do their job.
They're not in charge of the National Guard. You're in charge of the National Guard.
Actually, see, here's the problem. When he says security, he's talking about the Capitol Police, not the National Guard, but the mayor of DC actually is in charge of the National Guard. And Donald Trump can request, just like any state, to use the National Guard in certain situations like martial law or state of emergency, et cetera, et cetera. And it can't be done on the verbal. It has to be done in writing, and there has to be a formal request. So immediately she's already starting off. Now, the thing is that the best moments happen when Trump got off January 6th and the election from 2020 and started focusing on policy and really the points that CNN has made that have been false about him for so long. He handled himself flawlessly. But the problem is she kept interrupting. She kept putting in things that weren't true. And we'll go ahead and fact check some of those things tonight. And we'll hit Trump if they happen to show on The Blaze some of his finer moments. I'll be honest, the first 10, 15 minutes, I was not impressed. I was frustrated that Donald Trump kept doing what he's done for the last 2.5 years, which is talk about the election, talk about January 6th, and things that really had no bearing on his 2024 run and shouldn't. He should move on. But they asked and he answered. So how can you blame him? They knew exactly what they were getting.
Well, I offered them National Guard. I said, we'll give you soldiers, we'll give you National Guard, we'll give you whatever you want. And they turned me down.
You're
and in
acting
fact, she
defense
turned me down.
secretary.
She turned me down in writing.
But you said
So there is actually a letter from the DC mayor where there wasn't it was actually about taking 1,000 National Guard units, not for January 6th or running for security, but having them on standby. And obviously that was a normal procedure that happens during these events. And unless there is a pertinent threat, those are usually waved off and said, nope, that's okay. We're not going to go ahead and bring out these additional troops. It was not a formal request in writing by Donald Trump saying, we want 1,000 National Guard members here for security. We have, word that this might get out of hand, blah, 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 blah. So when you look at something in hindsight, it can be applied and you could say, oh, well, that was a preemptive move to stop any rioting or any protests that got out of hand. That's not what it was for. It was a formality that usually is turned down. It was not requested specifically by Trump. And if you went ahead and look at some of the testimony that was made during the January 6th committee, a lot of Trump supporters predominantly said, no, there was no formal request at any time, and we're not aware of it. Now, that's really not the point. The point is what Donald Trump is saying is Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell are absolutely in charge, along with the Master at Arms for Capitol Police. And that is what he is saying. And of course, she wants to bring up the National Guard because they want to hang him with that because there wasn't a written request for this.
you weren't very involved that day. You did tell your supporters to come to Washington. You tweeted about it, about that speech that happened on the rally.
Am I allowed to say that?
When they went to the Capitol and they were breaking into the Capitol, smashing windows, injuring police officers, why did it take you?
All right. So once again, a false negative, right? A false negative trying to turn it into a positive for her side. This absolutely is not what Donald Trump invited people to do. He didn't invite people to riot. He didn't invite people to break in. There were 57,000 people there that did absolutely nothing other than enjoy the rally and go home. For her to go ahead and assign that really is a red herring argument, because what she is saying is because of what Trump did by sending out a tweet, January 6th happened. And there's absolutely nobody who's saying that. Of course, that's not what took place. And no accusation of that is taking place. A lot of the argument is that at the rally, Trump used certain words like we're going to go ahead and march up there together and fight, etc. All the words that Democrats have used with BLM. Maxine Waters has said it. Pelosi has said it. Hillary Clinton has said it. The word fight has been used since civil rights. Let's be honest. But the problem is that Democrats take Trump literally for everything he says. Doesn't matter, to the literal nth degree of what he says, versus the Democrats, which can say just about anything. And unless you have the crib key, it really doesn't matter. There's a secret language that they use, which gives them a carte blanche pass every single time.
3 hours to tell them to go home.
I don't believe it did. Oh, let me pull it out. I have to pull it out.
Let me go ahead and pull this. Let me whip this out 1 second. Wait 1 second while I whip this out.
So if you look at on January 5th, the day before, I said, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. Stay peaceful. This was the day before, and this was in the form of Twitter. Now use Truth Social.
Folks, right there puts the entire January 6th bullshit committee where it belongs. Somewhere underneath the pig trough and underneath pig's feet. This just destroys the narrative. But remember, he also made 2 tweets, which he's going to give you the timestamps for, which were his final 2 tweets on Twitter. Say that 3 times very fast, which were both the same thing. Very, very dormant, very docile, asking for people to remain peaceful, to respect the Capitol Police, that this is not the way. But of course, they suspended his account. So in one hand, they tell him, you have to stop this. This is your responsibility. This is your riot, which obviously that's not his job. If there's a riot in Los Angeles, you didn't see, Joe Biden or Barack Obama come and fly out and try to stop it. That's not his job. He obviously has people who are assigned to do that. However, he did use those words before it and after it And there was absolutely zero context of him instigating or asking his supporters to riot. That is a complete fallacy. Once again, the secret crib key, Democrats can use words they want. Donald Trump has to say everything perfect. And if he doesn't, they'll still find a way to twist it around.
So I think it's far superior, okay? I hope everybody's on truth. If you look January 6th, this is before 2:30. I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. This is right after, as it was happening. But what happened is they took it down. I don't know why. I think they took it down because it was so good. They didn't like it being up there. I am asking, and we didn't know until I got it back, because now I have 90 million people waiting for me to go back, but I'm on truth and I'm staying on truth. Listen, I am asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violation. We want no violation. We want no violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order.
So a lot of people ask me, Matt, who are your inspirations for, radio shows or podcasts or interviews? Like, I'm a huge Paul Harvey fan. I don't know, as far as Mike Rowe, the way he presents, the way he writes, he's probably my biggest influence. Larry King is a fairly large influence. Walter Cronkite is a big one for me because of the Kennedy assassination. But one of the most prolific, and I think one of the best at what they do, happens to be somebody who outed my Houston Astros for the trash can incident, and I forgive him for that because it was a wonderful piece of investigative reporting, is John Boy from John Boy Media. This guy is, in my opinion, probably one of the best commentators in the business. He uses a very particular set of skills when it comes to lip reading. He is excellent at delivering points from an unbiased perspective. He has a level of humor which is on par for most people. He has the ability to cuss in his show and still people just gloss over it because it's such an effective way of just regurgitating what the coaches or managers or players are saying, and he doesn't necessarily make it a part of his routine. This isn't for me to pump up John Boy Media and have you go over there and not watch this show. But the point is Donald Trump is excellent at these type of things as well. He uses a mix of humor. He can say things that most people can't say. And he's not necessarily the best orator or communicator, but when he is off the cuff, he knows his stuff and he's able to deliver it in a way which creates a human element with his audience. That's why Donald Trump is adored. It is because he's not this prosthetic politician. The reason I bring up those people is because I think they all share one other commonality that Donald Trump doesn't share, is that they have the ability to admit when they're wrong or when they make a mistake. This interviewer has a huge responsibility here that she is broadcasting these comments when CNN has gotten this wrong for 7 years. They've went after Donald Trump. They've made fictitious stories. They've had to backpedal. We know lawsuits that have gone on, especially with Rittenhouse and also, some smaller players when they've went ahead and said things that aren't accurate in regards to Republicans. This would be a great opportunity for her to stop and say, you know what, Mr. Trump, I think those are very good points. I think we all have to take a look at what you said in January 5th, which extends into January 6th, since that was your last word. And then you were in the middle of a rally when this started, and then you came back. And obviously that's going to create a little confusion. I'm not going to give you a pass on this, but what I am going to say is that's a very good point. I appreciate your perspective. And I think that clears up a lot of things for our audience. That would have been such a humble and a fluent way to communicate that you were wrong and he's right. But that set the tone for the rest of the town hall, which was supposed to be people in the audience asking questions. Instead, it became a persecution and Spanish Inquisition from the lady in white, which is fitting, if you know the history of the Democrats, versus Donald Trump, which nobody wanted to see. We've seen that before, and that regurgitated mess never is successful.
Respect the law and our great men and women in blue. Thank you. That was at 2:30. That was very early.
Mr. President, I looked at the same timeline that you did.
No, I know, but you didn't report that. You know why? Because it was taken down.
We did report it. I was reporting that thing.
It was taken down and it wasn't.
But when it was clear to you that they were not being peaceful, you saw them rushing the Capitol, breaking windows. They were hitting officers with flagpoles, tasing them, beating them up. When it was clear they weren't being peaceful, why did you wait 3 hours to tell them to leave?
He didn't wait 3 hours. He just told you he waited till 2:30. Caitlyn is being disingenuous and unfair. So she has her talking points, and she is refusing to move outside the boundaries of the blue 25-pound weight, 8.5 by 11 in size 10 font paper in her hand. This is the lack of creativity that CNN has, that they're unable to think on their feet and have a human moment with their audience. It's, once again, prosthetic, it's fake, and it puts Trump in a situation where he has to repeat himself ad nauseum, and everyone around them is like, we understand what he's saying. Why can't you move on? Because they don't have the presence of thought to be creative. They only can stay in their box. What they're prescribed to do by CNN is to make Trump look foolish, to destroy him on every point that he makes that goes against what the narrative is, and he has brought receipts. Those receipts tell a different story, and they actually tell the truth of what happened versus the narrative that Caitlyn is trying to espouse.
The Capitol. They listen to you like no one else. You know that.
They do. I agree with that. But
So why didn't you tell them to go home sooner?
Nancy Pelosi and the mayor are in charge. I assume they were able to do their job. They weren't.
But
And it
Pelosi's
kicked
not in charge of Capitol
And if you remember,
security.
I made a video
Yes, she
right
is.
outside the Oval Office in the Rose Garden. And I'm very proud of that video. I didn't have a script. I don't need scripts like a certain person that's in
But
there
what
right
time,
now.
the video, it came out much later after they had already attacked the Capitol. Going back to your influence, in
Here's
that
another
3
one I
hours,
posted.
over 140 officers were injured that day.
And a person named Ashley Babbitt was killed.
Yes.
You know what? She was killed, and she shouldn't have been killed. And that thug that killed her, there was no reason to shoot her. At blank range, cold blank range, they shot her, and she was a good person.
Yeah, I have a level of disagreement with Donald Trump on this. I've done several videos on this. I've showed the tape from all angles. A lot of people haven't seen all the angles. They didn't hear the words that were being said to the Capitol guards that were in front of those doors. This is a bone of contention with me. I don't think you should call any police officer a thug. That is a very derogatory statement that is used for criminals. You can disagree with what happened, you can argue, but until you've actually been in charge of operational security, if you don't understand what it's like to defend a perimeter or defend an area, and that is your charge and your general order, and you are told if this area is breached in any way, shape, or form, you stand your ground because we're here to protect. This is the last line of defense. Unless you've done that, you have no idea what you're talking about. I disagree with Donald Trump. I don't think it should be said. I think Ashley Babbitt, being murdered, being shot, whatever you want to say, is a tragedy in itself. But there are so many things before that happened that shouldn't have been said, that were lies that she followed. I think we need to stop and pause. A lot of people try to say that she was trying to promote security and get on the other side to block the hole. Folks, let's go ahead and stop making up stories that necessarily exonerate her of all responsibility for her actions. And let's not go ahead and do the same for the officer. I think it's truly important that we understand that there are multiple stories in January 6th, many different facets to this, and a end-all be-all solution isn't going to solve it. I wish Donald Trump would have waved off this question. I wish he would have moved on, shown and expressed some empathy for the officers, the empathy for the people who were there who were harmed, and move off the question. But once again, Donald Trump takes the bait on these, and he really needs to move off from this, because although most of the general public doesn't necessarily care about January 6th, every time you talk about it, they remember that situation and they associate it with him. It would be nice to see him simply walk away from this, but I don't think he can.
He was a patriot.
One
There was
person
no
who was
reason.
there-
There was no reason, and he went on television to brag about the fact that he killed her.
The officer was not bragging about the fact that he
Oh,
killed
he
her,
was
but one
bragging.
person.
Will you pardon the January 6 rioters who were convicted of federal offenses?
I am inclined to pardon many of them. I can't say for every single one, because a couple of them probably they got out of control. But, when you look at Antifa, what they've done to Portland, and if you look at Antifa, look at what they've done to Minneapolis and so many other places. Look at what they did to Seattle and BLM. Many people were killed. These people, I'm not trying to justify anything, but you have two standards of justice in this country, and what they've done, and I love that question, because what they've done to so many people is nothing. Nothing. And then what they've done to these people, they've persecuted these people. And yeah, my answer is I am most likely, if I get in, I will most likely, I would say it will be a large portion of them. You know, they did a very, and it'll be very early on. And they're living in hell right now.
So when it comes
they're
to
living
pardons,
in hell. And they're policemen, and they're firemen, and they're soldiers, and they're carpenters and electricians, and they're great people. Many of them are just great people.
Mr. President, one of the
So I think it's really important for people to understand the amount of people who are actually trying or looking to take hostages or grab Mike Pence or grab, the Speaker of the House or whatever it would be, Nancy Pelosi, et cetera, is relatively small. And we're talking sub 100 people. The stair situation and some of the outdoor altercations are what people remember, whether it be pepper spray, whether it be flagpoles, fire hydrants, doors, moving barricades and Ray Epps, or storming the anteroom chamber and punching through that glass and trying to break down that door. These things are what people see on CNN 24 hours, 7 days a week. Then you look at what Fox does, which shows predominantly only the peaceful side of this, which there was plenty of peaceful, absolutely no elevation, no attacks, walking, cheering, everything else, especially at the main rally. And then some people just walking through the Capitol and looking around and doing absolutely nothing. So it's a multifaceted situation, and there's two different sides, but only one side is being really proposed to the people of the United States. And it depends which side you're on, what you're seeing. This is why I try to bring both sides. I show you some of the most violent parts of January 6th, and most people go, oh my God, I've never seen that before. And then on the other hand, I show the more peaceful side of it, which was more than any violence was taking place. And people say, well, I've never seen that either. And if that's the case, then you have to understand that both sides are going to be diametrically opposed because they're seeing two different stories. This is where people get frustrated with me because they say, well, Matt, you have to be black and white. No, I don't. We can talk about individual instances inside January 6th, and you can have multiple opinions on who is right and who is wrong. And that will make up the collective whole of the argument. What they're doing is they're cherry picking what they want to see. This is what Tucker Carlson exposed. And it's not a coincidence that the QAnon shaman was Jake, whatever last name is, ultimately was released just 14, 15 days after those tapes were released because it demonstrated something completely different. And he was convicted of this. And then you look at the tapes, you're like, wait a second, what happened? If one story like that is false, then doesn't it behoove us to stop and look at every single story, even if it's the people like the Proud Boys that people think, oh my gosh, they're the worst, they're the collaborators, they created this, or the Oath Keepers. Shouldn't we look at every single individual case along with the Ashley Babbitt shooting to bring everything out to light? To have every angle, all audio, all perspective? And the answer is yes. But the problem is that's not what's happening. And CNN isn't interested in this. They're simply interested in hanging it over Donald Trump's neck.
People who was convicted was a former policeman, but he was convicted of attacking a police officer, I should note. But when you said you are considering pardoning a large portion of those charged with crimes on January 6th, does that include the 4 Proud Boys members who were charged and convicted
Proud Boys
of seditious conspiracy?
I don't know. I'd have to look at their case, but I will say in Washington, D.C., you cannot get a fair trial. You cannot. Just like in New York City, you can't get a fair trial either.
And this is the problem. And a lot of people, from CNN, oh, that's not true. It's a jury of your peers. No, it's not. You can't tell me in the middle of Kentucky, in the middle of Arkansas, that a liberal Democrat or a person from Antifa is going to get a fair trial. The same holds true. You stick somebody in my town here in Virginia, there's no chance that they're going to get a fair trial. That's why you can relocate these areas based upon discretion, and the prosecutor and defense can agree that we need to relocate this trial into somewhere else that's essentially not as toxic or volatile for either the defense or the plaintiff in this case. Which would be the United States government. When you open that up and you allow that to take place, it creates a fairness for both parties and a level where they can relocate that trial to an area that makes sense. When you don't do that, you then make it political. Washington, D.C. is one of the most liberal cities in the United States, and it is densely populated, very similar to Philadelphia, full of Democrats. The thing about this is Donald Trump is the face of January 6th, whether we like it or not. And to throw him in the middle of that swamp and say, well, we're going to go ahead and get you a jury of your peers, that's impossible. And it's not practical. This is why you have the ability to move the trial somewhere else and put it in an area that's more conducive to what they deserve, which is a fair trial with a jury of their peers. Now, I'm not saying that that would change things, but it certainly would take away the political ambiguity of the January 6 protesters and what they did. A fair example is Jacob. He's the QAnon shaman, where we saw that his sentence was so extreme based upon the video and his actions, which would simply be a misdemeanor. And to sit here and say that that's fair, obviously something was wrong, because he was released and his sentence was reduced to a point that was essentially a slap on the wrist versus being incarcerated instead of being on probation and house arrest for a limited time.
This woman, I don't know her. I never met her. I have no idea who she is. I had a picture taken years.
So this is going to be about Jean Carroll and the recent rape trial, which is really interesting. There's one point here that Donald Trump says something that I think is fantastic, that really puts the weight on Jean Carroll and the prosecution and the media to answer something I've never heard him say, and it's truly interesting. Let's listen to this.
To go with her and her husband, nice guy, John Johnson. He was a newscaster, a very nice man. She called him an ape. Happens to be African American. Called him an ape. The judge wouldn't allow us to put that in. Her dog or her cat was named Vagina. The judge wouldn't allow to put that in. All of these things but with her, they can put in anything.
So how is that not the meme of 2023? People need to soundbite that. Its cat is vagina. Change of venue. I had to look it up. I can't believe I was saying relocation. Sometimes things escape me because I get caught up. But yeah, simply changing. A change of venue is what it's called. It's submitted by the defense, usually for a change of venue to receive a more conducive juror selection process. Now, this whole juror selection process is interesting because with Jean Carroll, it was very, very different. Usually you get a certain amount of challenges on both the prosecution and defense to vet these jurors so you can get a balanced and more of an altruistic panel of jurists to go ahead and hear over the case. This was not the case in this one. There were no challenges. You weren't able to go ahead and vet these people. So in New York City, which is predominantly Democrat, it doesn't necessarily mean, especially in a civil trial, that you're going to have a high level of non-political, unbiased viewpoints, because everyone knows who Donald Trump is in New York. Simply that makes it very difficult. Now, a lot of cases, whether it be a murder trial or a high-profile case, these jurors can't have any prior knowledge of what took place. And if you're going to tell me that people don't know who Donald Trump is, that he wasn't the president of the United States, how can he possibly get a fair shake? How can he possibly get a fair trial? Because every single juror doesn't have that small sliver of doubt that every single one of them has to base their decision on. Makes sense. Listen to this.
This was a jury of 9 people who found you liable of sexual abuse. Do you think that will deter women from voting for you?
No, I don't think so, because I think the whole thing, just so you understand, ready? I never met this woman. I never saw this woman. This woman said, I met her at the front door of Bergdorf Goodman, which I rarely go into other than for a couple of charities. I met her in the front door. She was about 60 years old, and this is like 22, 23 years ago. I met her in the front door of Bergdorf Goodman. I was immediately attracted to her, and she was immediately attracted to me. And we had this great chemistry. We're walking into a crowded department store. We had this great chemistry, and a few minutes later, we end up in a room, a dressing room of Bergdorf Goodman, right near the cash register. And then she found...
Wow, it sounds like a trial of Law and Order SVU. Oh, wait a second. It was an episode of Law and Order SVU, and she's a writer, and she watches the show. She doesn't watch SVU, she says, because it's too violent. This lady has made 6 accusations of rape. She has only went after one person, Donald Trump. She went through in 2016. Criminal charges were completely dropped. This is a civil case. It has completely different level of parameters, requirements, and most criminal cases kind of see their day in court during civil. Is you may not get the prosecutorial jail time or sentence, but you get them in the wallet. And that's what happens. O.J. Simpson's a prime example. Innocent and then destroyed in the civil suits and bankrupted him. And that was his payment. And then he went ahead and stole stuff in Las Vegas and goes to jail. Anyway, the guy's obviously a winning citizen. But the whole point of this is that civil cases, if there is a judgment for the plaintiff, there's no criminality here. For saying it's sexual abuse and defamation is they're paying her for the defamation. They're not paying because there was rape. There was no rape. But of course, Democrats all around, rape. He's convicted. He's a sexual predator. And they won't even go ahead and talk about Bill Clinton. They won't even talk about the litany of cases that are lists of Democrats who've been charged with sexual misconduct, or looking at child porn. And on both sides, Republicans do it too. But this is the inconvenient truth that Al Gore should really point out, is that there is no accountability. And as long as any of these words have negative connotation, they will associate them with Donald Trump and now lie even more and call him a racist, or a rapist, which is interesting because isn't that defamation in itself? But of course, the media is never held responsible for things like this. Just presidential candidates and ex-presidents, it seems, on the Republican side.
Now, there are locks on the door. So she said, I found one that was open. She found one. She learned this at trial. She found one that was open. What kind of a woman meets somebody and brings them up, and within minutes, you're playing hanky-panky in a dressing room, okay? I don't know if she was married then or not. John Johnson, I feel sorry for you, John Johnson.
Mr. President, can I...
Hey, Dumb Nation, if you like the first part, please do me a favor. Go to the next segment. This will be part 2. The video was too long, so I want to make sure I gave you guys a little bit of a break so you can consume this large episode in a little bit of a smaller quantity. Make sure to watch part 2. Leave your comments, and I will see you tonight at 8:30 live.
I'm David Boreanaz with the Cast of SEAL team, and we have an important message for returning vets.
We want you to know if you're struggling to cope, there's help and it's just a phone call away.
The Veterans Crisis Line is staffed with experienced professionals who know your struggles.
There's no greater sacrifice in service to our country. We're able to enjoy our freedoms because of it.
Your service is important, you are important.
For vets and their families, the Veterans Crisis Line is here to help 24 hours a day. Please call